have a question, but for you, for the council.
Do you want us to come up there?
No, for the record. I ask you to address in your closing statement a particular issue, as you may recall, and which was whether the lesividad could be negotiated away. Now it has come up, and is something that we have in many instances seen in the reports, in the various memorials, the issue of the liability that the President would incur in relation to the declaration of lesivo. And I think we would appreciate some clarification in that respect, and that's related to the question that I had asked earlier, whether lesividad can be negotiated away. What are the implications for the President in that respect? And the other question I think that we would appreciate is, we have seen all these poles in the pictures and various buildings and so forth. I mean, particularly when it comes to the industrialist quarters, as they are called, which is, we are told, are power companies, power lines, to the extent that you know who owns these companies. Who is the owner? I mean, you don't need to answer now, but if you have to, if you know it, I mean, by all means.
The chart that you have shows the name of the company, or the initials, the acronym for the power company in question. We will try to find out who are the owners of those various power companies, but the chart shows the names of the power companies, and we'll see if we can't supply you with something like that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Horta.
Just since you've raised that issue, it is respondents' contention that the claimant has not established the authenticity of those photos, meaning while they have dates that have been superimposed by someone, it's our contention that they've not proven that those are pictures of industrial squatters post-lesivo, notwithstanding the dates that are included in those pictures.
But who, if you are questioning whether they are there, or that they are there at the time that is...
Well, in order to establish, I mean, as I understand it from an evidentiary standpoint, in order to establish that those are pictures of industrial squatters on the right-of-way, they need to have somebody who comes in here and says, on such and such a date, I was on the right-of-way, I took the picture, and these are squatters that were not here pre-lesivo, and I don't believe that has been established as a matter of evidence yet. And further that these are squatters that are there as a result of the lesivo declaration. I don't think any of those predicates have been established on the record.
May I respond to those assertions?
Yes, you may respond.
The third statement of Jorge Sen, which is in the record as sworn testimony, authenticates all of these photos. This is Annex 3 to his statement, and he authenticates all of these photos in that statement. So I don't think there's any question of foundation on authenticity of any of the photos on the record. I was prepared to have him answer questions when he came to testify here, but I didn't have enough time. That was actually the one topic I didn't get to during his
Would it be possible to point us to the specific references in Statement 3?
Yes, we can find that and respond. And then just on the additional point about the question of whether they were there before or after lesivo, the purpose of this evidence is not necessarily for that point. It's to support Mr. McSwain's testimony that there was sufficient demand for the use of the right-of-way by these types of businesses to use the right-of-way. But McSwain, as he testified today, It was his recollection for a lot of these photos, he did not observe those when he visited in 2007. So I think there's also evidence in the record regarding that as well. But the main purpose of these photos is to show the demand for the use of the right-of-way to support Mr. McSwain's testimony and opinions.
Mr. Horta?
Yeah, I'm fully aware of the third statement of Jorge Sen, and my objections to the evidence stand notwithstanding. We can address it in closing.
Just in terms of the evidence, that has been on the record for a certain amount of time, or
Yeah, this was filed with Mr. Sen's third statement, I believe. That doesn't change the legal point that I've just made. In other words, we've argued in our memorials, in all of our memorials, they've not established causation, including on the issue of pre and post lesivo squatting. That's a matter of argument that we have included in our papers.
Causation is maybe a legal determination that we have to make, but I think the question is, are you questioning, based on Mr. Sen's third report, which again I don't have fully in my mind in the photos, that these were taken after the declaration of lesivo? Are you questioning that?
I'd have to observe it carefully, and I can answer you either later this afternoon or first thing in the morning. But on the issue of whether they're pre or post lesivo squatters, which I think is a key issue given the way they have framed their case, I still believe there's an absolute void of evidence on that point.
So in your judgment, there's nothing in the record that indicates that these squatters weren't there pre-lesivo?
Or that they're there because of the lesivo declaration. It's both points.
Well, one's a factual issue and one is a causation issue, which is a legal issue. I'm just asking you factually, are you suggesting, because if that's the case, then we need to establish whether this fact can be determined. Are you making the argument that factually they have not shown that the squatters were not already there pre-lesivo?
Right. Correct. Nor have they alleged it in the record and with evidence. And had they, then we would have responded with evidence, but they haven't done that. So I just in response to your point, Secretary Eisenstadt, about whether that's something that they can now establish for the first time, we would be prejudiced because we wouldn't have the ability to respond with evidence to that point.
Just a further
yes,
point.
Mr. Stan?
Thank you. They had an opportunity to cross-examine Mr. Sen while he was here and chose not to cross-examine him on these photographs. And to answer Secretary Eisenstadt's question about where in Mr. Sen's third statement does he authenticate these photographs, I can read from paragraph 83 of that statement, and I'll read, quote, "In February and March 2011, I traveled the length of the entire right-of-way, both the main and rural spur lines, to assess what was the current state of industrial squatting on the right-of-way in the form of unauthorized utility poles and power lines. I discovered that industrial squatters, namely the power companies IGASA, which is EEGSA, INDE, which is INDE, DIORSA, DEORSA, and DIOXA, DEOCSA, are present on essentially the entire right-of-way, including in many instances on both sides of the right-of-way. After I completed my assessment, I helped prepare a detailed map which identifies these industrial squatters and where their unauthorized utility poles and power lines are currently located along the right-of-way. That map is Annex 1 to the rebuttal report of Robert F. McSwain. In addition, I took several photographs of these industrial squatters, which are identified and described in Annex 3 to this statement."
Do you have anything else to add, Mr. Horta?
No, the same evidentiary point stands.
still also my question stands to the extent that you can find out who the owner of the poles is. So thank you so much. We will break for a brief moment. Let's start not later than 4:15. Thank you.